So it is now time to put everything together that we have learned in this chapter, especially the last couple sections, and we're going to find zeros of our functions. Now what's going to happen is, in the past we've been given like a factor or like a zero, we plug it in using synthetic division, and we try to find out what our factors or our zeros are. Unfortunately, in this case, you will not be given factors. Oh snap. So what we're going to do is we're going to follow these steps here and determine how many zeros we have, and we're going to find them. So your first step is you want to determine your number of zeros. So that is just by looking at your degree. So then we're going to do our P over Q, which is what we just did in example 2, to find out what our possible real zeros are. And then we're going to use synthetic division to find remainders of 0. Once you get a 0, that means remainder of 0, that means you have a 0 as one of your answers. Anytime you can factor your quadratic equation to find your last two zeros, do that. If you can't factor, use your quadratic formula. One thing you have to remember is if you have a function of degree 4, you're going to have to use synthetic division twice. Your goal is to get down to like an x squared plus 2x plus 3, something like that. Get down so that you have an x squared. Once you have an x squared, you can either factor or use your quadratic formula, but you have to get down to an x squared. So we're going to look at example 3 here, and we're going to go through our steps. So the first thing is we're going to figure out how many zeros we should have. Well, we should have a total of 3 zeros in the final part of our problem. So if we have 3 zeros, then what we're going to do is we need to do our P over Q. So to find your P over Q for your possible zeros, well, Q is just the 1 and the 18 is your P. So we need to find factors of 18 and divide that by factors of 1. Well, remember, if you have factors of 1, then you're just going to divide by 1. So we really need factors of 18. So we're going to say plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3. Well, 3 times 6 gives you 18, 2 times 9 gives you 18, and 1 times 18 gives you 18. So these are your possible zeros. And what we're going to do is we're going to use these as possible zeros, and we're going to do synthetic division using our possible numbers. And we're going to get down to an x squared, because anytime you have an x cubed, if you do synthetic division, your depressed polynomial is an x squared. So let's start off with 1. 1 is a possible zero. So remember, read down your coefficients, 1, 2, 9, 18. And so you bring down the 1. 1 times 1 is a 1. You get a 3. 1 times 3 is a 3. You get a 12. 1 times 12 is 12. And you get a 30. Okay, well, we didn't get a remainder of 0. So since we didn't get a remainder of 0, that means 1 is not a 0. So now what we're going to do is we're going to try negative 1. So yes, start the groans. You want to be a good guesser here. If you're not a good guesser, then this process could take a little bit longer. But here's your coefficients. So we're reading down to 1. 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. Add those, you get a 1. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1 is a negative 1. You get an 8. You get negative 8. Remainder of 10. Sorry, I can hear you saying it already. Alright, well, that one's not going to work. So let's try 2. Let's just get crazy. Let's try a negative 2. So we're going to try a negative 2. We have a 1, 2, 9. Where are these numbers coming from? They are your coefficients. So bring down a 1. 1 times a negative 2 is a negative 2. You add those, you get a 0. Multiply those, you get a 0, so you get a 9. 9 times negative 2 is negative 18. You get a remainder of 0. So the good news is that means that negative 2 is an actual 0. So when we're trying to list out our zeros, like so, one of our zeros is negative 2. So we have to find 2 more because we have a degree of 3. So let's take our depressed polynomial here. We have an x squared plus a 0x plus 9. Now since we have it down to an x squared, you can either try to factor it, or you can solve the equation by setting it equals 0, or you can do the quadratic formula. I'm just going to solve this by moving the 9 over, and we're going to say x squared equals negative 9. And in order to solve this, you have to square root. Notice you have a negative underneath your radical. So that's going to come out as a plus or minus. Sorry, that's going to come out as an I. So we're going to have an I. What is the square root of 9? 3. So here are 2 more zeros. So overall, you end up getting a -2 and a plus or minus 3i. Those are your 3 zeros. So you have 1 real one, 2 imaginary zeros.